Good morning, good evening, good day, my Bahamian family, and also my global family. Today, I want to address the recent very tragic and alarming shooting that we had in the Bahamas. And even though I'm directing this to my Bahamian family, because we have a global audience around the world, and many of you are experiencing these same things in your location, whether it's in the U.S., Africa, UK, wherever it is, I believe everyone can benefit from the information that I'm going to share. So basically, what happened here in the Bahamas is that in broad daylight, we had 6 leaders of a gang that were basically assassinated by unknown persons. There's speculation about who did it and which other gangs and so on. But that's not what I want to focus on today. I want to focus on understanding what happened and the way forward. What do we do in situations like this? First of all, my condolences to persons who have lost family members, and my prayers for the young men out there in the Bahamas and around the world who are involved in what I call the game. So I want to share it with you today from a personal experience, both in the game, working with guys in the game, and then working to help people get out of the game. So what we want to focus on first of all is understanding that what happened and what is happening around the world with violence is shocking but not surprising. Now, why do I say shocking but not surprising? It's shocking the way it happens from time to time, but it's not surprising that it happens. In order to understand why it's not surprising, we have to get a historical perspective. What we are experiencing now is what you would call on the streets the game. Now, what is the game? The game is street life. The game is thug life. The game is gang life. That's the game. And once you are in the game, things happen a certain way. So we cannot really be surprised that this is happening or that it will continue to happen because the game exists. Now, you want to say, how do I know about the game? Well, the game has changed in terms of the players and the tactics, but it's the same game. So if we rewind a bit and go back to when I was growing up as a young person, I was in the game. I was in a neighborhood and I moved in certain areas in Nassau where the game was existent. So for example, I grew up in an area called Warren Street, and at that time, Warren Street was a part of the game. I hung out in an area called Harlem, McQuay Street, Nassau Street, which was also a part of the game. I hung out in Baintown. Baintown was a part of the game. I hung out in Camp Road. Camp Road was a part of the game. Okay? I hung out in Mason's Addition. So I was all over, and wherever I went, the game existed. So I understand the game. Now, let's talk about how the game was and how the game is today for you to understand the changes. So, for example, I'll just give you an incident that happened, and I'll keep names out of it and everything, but I'll just show you how the game works. So, when you're on the streets, for example, Warren Street, Harlem, 2 of the areas that I was prominently involved in, you had drug dealers. You had dope spots. So if you have a dope spot, basically you had guys who were working for whoever the dealer was, and they sold the products on the streets, and they had to make sure that they protected their supply. So if one day, and this is what I witnessed happen, one day some guys from another area came and they robbed one of the guys who was a street level dealer. And so the guys who were running that particular block, I watched all of this happen personally, and I saw it myself. They went and they called some of their boys from different areas. They all came together, they collaborated, and they went into this other area, and they went and they chop guys with cutlasses, they beat them with baseball bats, they smash bottles on their head, and so on. What were they doing? Well, if somebody came and they took your drugs or the proceeds of your drugs and you did nothing about it, then it means that you would be eliminated and your block wouldn't have any respect. You will be disrespected. And so basically, it was almost like, I'm saying almost, but the truth is you had to retaliate. If you didn't retaliate, then you are finished, so to speak. And as I said, being around certain areas, being around and being involved in certain things, I knew the game very, very well. I understand the game. As time went on, the game changed. So back in the day, you would get guys together, they'd beat people with baseball bats. I saw the transition take place. There was another incident that I'm well aware of where this time, similar type thing happened. Somebody put a gun to someone else's head, took their drugs, and so then the other guys, now somebody used a gun, so the other guys are using guns. So then they had to go and they had to retaliate. So you can see the escalation. Now what has happened over time is that you have the game continuing, but the tactics and the players changing. The players in the Bahamas have been they've been impacted by the gang culture in the United States. I was personally involved with a lot of the young men from the streets. I was involved from the days of the syndicate. When I say involved, I was involved in helping them get out of the game and leave the life. So, I was involved with the syndicate, the rebellion, the gun dogs, the gun hawks, the Hoyas of Kemp Road. Just about many, many different gangs. I personally mediated disputes. There have been incidences. I remember one incident very vividly where I had to intervene between one gang coming for another guy who was in my youth group. And we were in a youth meeting, and the gang showed up in the youth meeting, and I had to use my negotiation skills, my reputation as being someone who's been involved in the streets and knowing a lot of the players. I had to use my skills to help diffuse that situation and get out of it. So I understand the game. What's happening in the Bahamas today is that the game has changed and the stakes keep rising because the tools that people are using are rising. So back in the day, as I said, even when guns were involved, you might have had one person shot and one person might have been killed here or there. But now the killings are constant because one person is killed and then there's a retaliation. And then you bring in the gang element and better organization. Back in those days, gangs were not very well organized. Now they're more organized. Now a lot of it is centered around the drug trade. And one of the things that I remember vividly when I was directly involved in working with a number of gang members is that it's easy to mediate disputes when it doesn't involve money or person's family getting killed. When somebody kills somebody's brother, going to talk to the guy on the other side and trying to get them to come together is very difficult. So that's what's happening in the game today. So what we are seeing is almost a generation of killings. People killing someone's brother, someone's cousin, someone's family member, and their brother, sister, family member retaliates. And the game continues like that. So we cannot be surprised by what's happening. And we also have to understand that it is a cultural thing. When I say a cultural thing, this culture is now ingrained in our society. I happen to know a lot about what's happening on the streets, even though I'm not directly involved. For years, I was directly involved. For years, I personally knew many of the hitmen in the Bahamas on a one-on-one basis. Some of them came through our ministry. We had a ministry that dealt with gang members. I sat down across the table from guys talking to me about, they went and purchased a Mark 10 and they're getting ready to kill 6 people. I mean, I had those types of conversations with guys, and I had to do my best to intervene in certain situations. So I'm quite aware. And what I have gathered from my experience on the ground is that this is a cultural thing. And I still have contact with a lot of guys on the ground, so I know what's happening. I have a very good idea. So as Bahamians, we have to have an appreciation that this is now a part of our culture. Years ago, you had young people aspire to go to college. Now you have young people aspiring to go to jail to get stripes. When we look at the culture that we live in today, gang violence is a part of the culture. If you look at the U.S., you'll see now a lot of rappers getting killed because they are singing about it and also living it. And some of them feel like they have to prove it by getting involved, even if they aren't involved. And I'm just over the last year, you had a number of gang members get killed. I mean, it's all over the news. You had Pop Smoke, you had guys go to jail, NBA Youngboy, you had Kodak Black, somebody just tried. He went to McDonald's and a group pulled up on him and tried to shoot. So this is a part of the culture, and we have to understand that. So as I said, we have to recognize what's happening in the Bahamas before we talk about what we can do about it. It's a part of our culture. Now, how did we get there? It began with individuals. A gang problem is not a gang problem. A gang problem is an individual problem that becomes a family problem, that becomes a children problem, that becomes a community problem, that becomes a national problem, that becomes a global problem. It all begins on the individual level. So things in society like drug abuse, crime, fraud, crookedness, all of these things have contributed to where we are today. And sometimes people look at what's happening with the police and they say, well, the police are crooked. The truth of the matter is the police are as crooked as the culture. The gang members are as crooked as the culture. The politicians are as crooked as the culture. The preachers are as crooked as the culture. Everybody is a victim of what's happening in the culture. So if we want to be better, we have to be better individually in order to be better collectively. In my personal life, I was someone who was a part of the negative culture, but things have changed. My life has changed. And what I've been trying to do is to give back and to help others. And many people know my story. Many people know, the things that I've done over the years. But I just want to focus in on what to do after a tragedy like this takes place. There are several things that I think that are important. One is take an individual look. Everything begins on the individual level. You have to ask yourself the question, am I contributing to this problem? You may say, well, I'm not contributing to the problem. I don't traffic in no guns. I don't do it. But are you doing things that can help corrupt young people, can help to have children born outside of a family? What are you doing? And I think we have to look at it individually. The second thing is we have to look at it from a family perspective. The stronger the family is, the better the society is. Many of these guys that I've worked with, they have no fathers. I'll tell you a true story. There's 2 young men that I work with, and they were of Haitian descent. And one of them became a gang leader. And he told me an interesting story. He said, man, you know what? He said, when I was 11, 12 years old, my parents left and never said a word. So they just left. And him and his brother, they had to raise themselves. Another young man I work with, he didn't know who his father was, and his mother had issues. And another one, his mother was a cocaine addict. He didn't know who his father was. And so this story is repeated. And this is where a lot of our issues come from. So it begins on the individual level, then it goes to the family level, then it goes to the community level. These young men who have no role models, who have no guidance, who have no direction, they end up in gangs because a gang is a family, and a gang gives them a sense of meaning, purpose, belonging, protection, whatever it is. So that's how it happens. Now, what do we do about it? Here's what we can do about it. And you cannot point a finger at any one institution or organization. If it's not collective, it's not effective. It has to be everybody involved. So you have schools, you have churches, you have communities, you have the police, you have the court system, you have the political system. Everyone has to play a role. And let's talk about how we can be effective. So beginning in the school, whatever's happening on the streets, the guidance counselors, teachers, and others know. So you have to do interventions in the schools. I've been personally involved with interventions in the school where we have sent persons, teams into the schools to work with young men. In fact, years ago, I personally went to multiple high schools and said to the guidance counselors, give me the gang members. And I formed a group with the gang members, and I sat down and talked to them. I brought in some of my friends who were ex-gang members, who were ex-drug dealers and so on, and we talked to these young men, and today some of these young men are husbands, fathers, businessmen, pastors. I could give you names and addresses. So it was through these types of interventions that good things happen. The schools have programs to help to intervene. So all of these programs, and everyone who can do something should do something. If you can't go yourself, support those who go. One of the problems that I had and we continue to have with some of the programs that we have instituted is funding. We had programs that there's a program that we've done in the last few years. A lot of my work was when I was younger. I was known on the streets as the roughneck pastor, and I worked with a lot of these guys. Over time, my role has changed, my status has changed. I'm now a senior pastor, and so I'm not necessarily on the ground, but I am still orchestrating programs. One of the programs that we orchestrated that impacted a lot of these young men was a program called Second Chance. And Second Chance was developed and run in conjunction with one of the guys who I mentioned, who was a gang member and who was on the streets. And his life changed, and so he came and gave back. And again, one of the problems with that program, where we had up to 100, 150 young people coming here on a weekly basis and us working with them, was funding. But it's very, very important to get involved. So you have to get involved at the school level, the community level. Things like sports, things like mentorship programs, community centers, all of these things can be helpful. And each of us, we should do what we can. Churches, if you can develop a youth program, some type of intervention program, if you can go into schools, if you can work with young men, anything constructive helps to prevent things that are destructive. So whether it's sports, whether it's church youth group activity, whether it's drama, music, getting involved in something community oriented, all of these things help. So we need to be involved. And, as I mentioned, I know it works because I have names and faces, and I have many, many young men. The young man who's the pastor, the senior pastor, or the campus pastor of our church in Freeport was a guy who came off of the streets that I mentored. And today he has a master's degree, and he's married, he has a family, he has a business, and he's doing extremely well. So we know that the church can play a role, but we all have to be involved. Not every church may have the resources. You work with what you have. If you formulate a program, there are the social services, there are others who assist with funding in some cases, and then we also have benefactors who will assist once they understand a program is effective and you can verify it. Another aspect of this is drug programs. A lot of these young men who are in gangs, a lot of them who are in violence, are also on drugs. And so programs like BASH and Teen Challenge and others are very effective in helping some of these young men get out not only of drugs, but getting out of criminal activity. So all of these programs are things that we have to be involved in collectively. Remember, I said if it's not collective, it won't be effective. In terms of Not that it won't be effective in helping, it won't be effective in massive change if it's not collective. The other thing that we have to look at, of course, are things like the court system and policing. Of course, the courts have to do their job, the police have to do their job, the politicians have to do their job. We have to all be involved. You can't point the finger at one group of people. You can't blame one group of people. Everybody is to blame in some respect, and everybody can play a role. And so I think it's very important for us to understand it. And the last thing I want to say is, I just want to remind you that, when I speak, I'm not speaking rhetoric. I'm not speaking things that I don't know of. I've been around the game. I've been in the game. I understand the game. I work with a lot of the guys who are currently involved in the game. And I've seen many guys get out of the game. But you have to understand the way the game works. The types of things that we are seeing is not unexpected or surprising. When they do happen, it's still shocking sometimes in the way they happen, but it's not surprising. But we have to work together. And I am willing to do my part. I have a number of young men that I'm working with who are on the ground. We have programs here at the church. I'm willing to share the knowledge of what we are doing. I'm really willing to share information. We have videos, we have testimonies, we have, a number of things that can help others who want to get involved, others who want to fund programs. The information is available. We have the information for you. You can contact us. We are Bahamas Faith Ministries and our affiliated churches, the International Association of Kingdom Churches and Ministries, the Bahamas chapter, is willing to assist the government, the community, whoever. We are willing to assist wherever we can to make a change. So I just want to say once again, thank you, and we continue to pray that our Bahamas would change for the better. But change happens because of us. Change doesn't happen because we get on a talk show and say, this is terrible. The police need to get guns off the streets, but if you don't have the heart of a man, it's hard to get the gun of a man. Because if a man's heart is evil, he can find a gun. No matter what types of things that you do to try to prevent it. And we have to understand that the police, people are pointing fingers at the police right now. The police are only as crooked as the neighborhood, and the police come from the neighborhood. And we know of incidences. I mean, I like I said, I've been around the game, so I know instances of police being crooked and involved in stuff. I could tell you stories. I know things. I don't want to get into detail, but many times, wherever there's gang activity or drug activity, there is some form of police cover, some form of police exchange. There's something going on. There are good police and then there are bad police, and it does exist. So, we can't ignore it and say, well, this never happens, because we know that it happens. And persons who have been in the game, persons who've been on the streets, they know that it happens. So, let's realize that, we have to be vigilant on all levels. We have to be vigilant to try to get rid of police who may be corrupt. We have to be vigilant to try to reach the guys in the gangs. We have to be vigilant to prosecute guys who are doing crimes that are hurting people and hurting society. So it's a collective thing. So once again, thank you. And I just want to say, from my perspective, as somebody who was on the streets, who was involved in things at different levels, and whose life has been changed, and who's seen others' lives change. It was the gospel of Jesus Christ. It was my commitment to Christ that changed my life. And I don't know what works for everybody, but I know this worked for me. And so from the perspective, if you want to call it church worked. The gospel of the kingdom, the gospel of Jesus Christ, worked for me to help me to turn my life around. It worked for a number of young men that I work with. It's worked with guys who I work with who are working with young men. So This is a proven, this ministry, this gospel has a proven track record of changing lives. Whether you believe or don't believe, the results matter. And this is one of the many, many avenues that can bring results. If you know of another avenue, then present it. But I'm presenting this today to tell you that the gospel changes lives, because it changed my life and it changed many, many others who I've been working with. So once again, thank you, and we continue to pray for the Bahamas. We continue to pray for the families on both sides of these young men who are involved in this situation, and we pray for change, and we are here to help wherever we can. Thank you, and God bless you.